All right, so we have gone over the death of Warlock. We have gone over the death of Ramsey. So now I felt that it was time to go over the Douglock Chronicles Part 1. This is Excalibur, issue 78. And this, again, is one of those comics that I just happened upon. I think it was a garage sale or something like that. And one thing that drives me nuts, and I know that not everyone in the world is a collector like me, but damn, bag and board your books, man. You know, you find them and they're just slapped on the table like yesterday's funny pages, and it drives me nuts. Anyway, you thought you'd never see him again, and you've never seen him before. And that, again, just like with the Fantastic Four, this is just a great way to explain what Douglock is without giving too much away on the cover. But at least for those longtime New Mutants and X-Men fans, this was a beautiful way to bring them back. And what I love more is you crack it open, and it starts with Zero. And Zero, along with Strife and Cable, is one of my favorite creations from Rob Liefeld. I believe he was the one that created Zero. Welcome. I am an ambient, energy dampening actualization module, all with it. What does that say? Extraterrestrial null, designed to signify prototype status. But you can call me Zero. And this is another thing, if you guys haven't noticed by now, Zero's talking. If you remember the early New Mutants and X-Force, Zero never talked. And because his face was blank, you never really got an idea of what he was saying. And he was even silent during, what's that event? Not Fatal Attraction, is the one before it that we went over. The Executioner song. So seeing him talk all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? You responded to my sentience seeking distress beacon. That is good. That makes me feel good. It defies analysis. Clearly, there is much we must explore together. So for me personally, I don't know if Zero has talked prior to this, but just seeing him all of a sudden warming himself by a fire, talking and saying that is good, that makes me feel good. It would be like watching Data all of a sudden just grow feelings. It's just for what it was, that type of moment for me. This is plot by Scott Lobdell, script by Chris Cooper, pencils by John Royle, inks by Harry Candelario, lettering by Babcock and Brosseau, coloring by Chris Matthys. We'll go with that. And then, of course, I love Ken Lashley's work on the cover. Beautifully dynamic. So then we see this hand, and we're like, who is Zero talking about? What's going on here? And what I love is, still, you think, oh, reveal on the next page, right? Nope. Yeah, it feels a little reading. But one thing about Scott Lobdell, and let's think, who else? Scott Lobdell, Louise Simonson, Ann Nasanti, Walt Simonson, John Byrne. And those are just names off the top of my head, but you can see how Claremont rubbed off on every single one of them. And it may not have just been Claremont, but think about Claremont, Dave Cockrum, and Len Wein started the X-Men back with Giant Size. And then Claremont teamed up with Ann Nasanti. And of course, he's working with Dave Cockrum, and then John Byrne did. But then, Louise Simonson married, I believe, married Walt Simonson, because, at the time she was Louise Jones. But you could see how all of them worked together, sharpened one another. And when you read their books, you can see how they wanted to write something that was operatic and compelling. And you can still see that in like Roy Thomas work, Stan Lee work. And what I love is Scott Lobdell, when they gave him the reins to just about almost every freaking X book. Because during this time period, you look at Uncanny, you look at X-Men. Yes, I know Fabian Nicieza was in there as well. But still, you would see how Scott Lobdell's finger was still on those books. And you can see how Claremont very much, and probably in essence John Byrne and Louise Simonson, inspired him. Because when you read this era, before he left in the latter half of the 2000s, even though the artwork and things were a little more gritty, you can still feel the essence of what is X-Men. So when you see writing like this, during this time period, it wasn't just BS filler. It was, you're reading something, you're feeling something, and it's enhancing the moment. So instead of seeing the reveal, we just see this person off panel saying, what is this location? A cave in North America, designated Maine, USA. What is the significance of your current actions? I am attempting to elude pursuit and avert destruction by hunter-killer droids. Droids programmed by my former master Strife to delete all Strife-related data and material in the event of his termination. Strife has indeed been terminated. I have been classified as a Strife-related and therefore have been targeted. You misunderstand. Rephrasing query. What is the significance of your immediate behavior? And again, I love the juxtaposition here of straight Android. Think of it, and if you want a more blatant, think of it like Data speaking the lore. And I almost said Data. And Zero just says, I am warming myself by the fire. I fail to grasp the relevance. It is illogical. As an artificial construct like myself, you should be operational under a wide range of temperature conditions. And I love how, Zero doesn't go to argue. He goes, it is a human behavior, common when seeking comfort. Another feeling that defies analysis. Perhaps the fire can provide data for the analysis. You seek feelings in fire, but these feelings come from within me. Changes as sweeping as your techno-organic virus transforming a stick of wood. And so we see this hand grab a piece of wood. We're thinking, wait, techno-organic virus? Wait. Now, real quick, for this to make sense, we would, and I haven't gone over it yet, but to give you all some backstory, go back and read the Phalanx Covenant, the event that introduced Generation X, because within the Phalanx, you'll understand sort of what built this up. So with that said, we realize this is essentially the return of both Warlock and Doug Ramsey, but not as separate entities. Because if you remember back in the early New Mutants, Warlock and Doug became very close friends. And at times to save the New Mutants, they would merge together. And Doug would say, I'm not afraid, Warlock. Go ahead and let's merge together. So, but you too must know these things, or you wouldn't have answered my call. Have you changed, Ramsey, Doug? He stares at the fire, hoping for an answer. But the images that flicker across his circuits are not of flame, but of faces. Faces that are as young, as open as human as the faces he imperfectly replicates. Faces belonging to the next generation of Homo sapiens superior to New Mutants. Faces of people that a young man named Doug Ramsey once called friends. But the memories are just fragments of someone else's life. Though they burn bright, they're cold as ash, swept away and replaced by the relentless pull of the Phalanx, the murderous collective mind of which, until recently, he was a part of. So read Uncanny X-Men 313. I believe 313 was part of the Phalanx Covenant. And suddenly, the fire in his hands is nothing but a combustive reaction of oxygen and flammable. Your query is strange. Change of some sort is inevitable for all things. However, my fundamental programming remains consistent. Perhaps, but my summons has isolated you from the Phalanx. Their mission, their programming directives are no longer yours. Unacceptable. I must have purpose. The answers we seek are not in this cave, but somewhere out there. Please specify location, parameters, where out there. And so, in a sense, even though we get Doug and Warlock back, we see that he has a lot to learn. And so what I appreciated about this is even though we kind of, in a sense, get two characters back that we've missed, they're still new. And again, as I said at the beginning, you thought you'd never see him again, and you've never seen him before. Just a great way to bring it all together. And as I talked about in my last review of Excalibur, I love that Kitty, like, at this point, Liddell is kind of starting to point back to Kitty's relationship with her parents because she's feeling isolated. She doesn't understand what's going on with her dad. And then again, another thing that I will say that I'm glad that Britannic has finally been retconned. But if you remember at the last issue, he said that he was being drawn to some sort of cataclysmic event. And the game said, calm yourself, Britannic. For now it is enough that we are here. I trust the reason shall become clear in time. The kid even says, do you, Megan? I'm not as certain. It feels like we've been here for hours, watching the pine needles grow. Since Brian returned to Excalibur as Britannic, his behavior has been erratic. Though I suppose being lost in the time stream is bound to have its effects, even on the brain. And so again, I love that we get reference to how Kitty has grown, but yet there's still things that she's trying to struggle with, just as all adults do. And then we get this quiet. Yes, there's a cool thing of reuniting Xavier and Moira, but what I want to get onto here is we're in the woods of Maine. And this little girl wants to go play out in the woods. Or no, not in the play. She's going to the bathroom. Toilet paper. So anyway, she says, you're a big girl now, but don't go too far, Courtney. Uh-huh. And she runs in to Zero. Awe gives way to curiosity about a creature so wondrous and rare. And he just straight up picks her up, which it turns out is exactly what Courtney was feeling too. And while Zero may never fully grasp what it is that makes a being like this so special, somewhere in his circuits and logic pathways, a dawning consciousness recognizes that for all the destructive power at his command, he's holding something far greater than himself. So he tries to treat it appropriately. Like any thoughtful visitor to the wild, he leaves it as he found it, though with a little more to dream about tonight. And so, he just kind of picks her up forcefully, and he's examining it as something foreign would. But then as the text says, he realizes it. Gently puts her down, picks up her bunny, hands it to her, and walks away. And I love how we see how Zero's learning, and Douglock is just here in the back, kind of like brooding, analyzing. I do not understand that human now has critical data regarding our location. Logically, you should have disabled its functions to ensure that the data was not acquired by Strife's droids. Stop. Listen to yourself. You talk about terminating a human life as if you were deleting an obsolete data file. Is the logic faulty? The way of life is faulty. And right here, again, as I was talking about how Zero's face has always been blank and you don't really see emotion, look at how the art team gives him a scowl. There is little time. You must overcome the fault, begin functioning at a new level. That is why I freed you from the collective mind of the Phalanx. Not because I just needed help, but because I sensed you were different from the others. More than just techno-organic device. You could transcend your programming and achieve sentience. You must. Request clarification. Why would you think I would be any different from the rest of the Phalanx? I will show you. Prompting memory playback of former organic files of unit designate Ramsey, Doug. And at that point, he floods Douglock's mind with both Warlock's memories and Doug's. And he sees how it was during the fall of the Mutants, I believe it was, when Doug took a bullet for Rain because they were fighting Cameron Hodge and the shock troops or whatever they were called. Witness the experiences of your organic ascendant and remember. Once more, images flicker through his circuits as the final actions of the new mutant Doug Ramsey are played with the same tragic consequences. This act was not logical. It ran contrary to all survival imperatives, but it was profoundly human. This is the stock from which you were derived. Based on this data, I suspected, I hoped, something would prove different about you. And what I love is at this moment, we think, oh, that's going to affect him. He goes, you are in error. I am of the Phalanx. I am the Phalanx. We are forever. Anyway, everything comes to a boiling point at the end. Tragedy, of course, happens. We kind of get what Britannic was supposed to find, and it just kind of leaves you in a shock as we see Kitty looking at this creature. And she goes, Doug, is it you? Say something. And so now Kitty, on top of all these things that she's dealing with Braddock, her family, now someone from her past is looking at her face to face. Guys, this was a damn good issue, and I'm just glad that I happened upon it. Still, I wish all you garage sellers put them in plastics, even if it has to be a freaking Ziploc bag. Just stop leaving them to the elements. Anyway, with that said, if you guys have enjoyed what you see, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever there's like to get your action figures and comics and pick up this series. This was freaking excellent. And if you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little Britannic bell, next subscribe. That way I get to upload content. You guys get notified. Come to the channel. And I love talking with you on hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.